Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. This is the preview to the 2022 Giro d'Italia. Now, last year we saw Team INEOS really dominate throughout the Giro d'Italia, with the exception of those last mountain stages in the last week here of the Giro d'Italia when Egen BERNAL had some problems, but he had Danny Martinez there backing him up, and he chauffeured him all the way to the finish to wrap up Giro d'Italia in basically a fantastic style for Egen BERNAL to win at the Giro. There was that little hiccup, but it was small. Now, the problem is when we dissect Team INEOS this year, they don't have Egen BERNAL, they don't have Danny Martinez. But in their place, they have Richard Carapaz, my number one favorite to win here at the Giro d'Italia 2022. Now, he's won here before in 2019, but that year when Richard Carapaz won, remember, he had a little bit of two big favorites back there with Vincenzo Nibali and Primoz Roglic really battling out, causing some hesitation, and then Richard Carapaz went up the road and won the Giro d'Italia. But Richard Carapaz is a big rider, he's won big races, and we know that he can go deep into a 3-week race. So I'm putting him as my number one favorite. When we dissect the team a little bit deeper, though, you got to remember, there's no Filippo Ganna here. And there's nobody that can replace the Italian rider. He was marvelous in the 2021 Giro d'Italia. He was the glue between all the mountain men and the flat riders for Team INEOS. And whenever they were in trouble, such as the stage of 2019, it was Filippo Ganna that really brought all the riders back together with his powerful legs. He was climbing well, and he was getting deep into the mountain stages. So when we look at Team INEOS for 2022, even though Richard Carapaz is still my favorite, I don't put him up there with Egen BERNAL. Richie Porte hasn't had a great season so far here in 2022, so I don't believe he's going to be able to replace Danny Martinez from last year here at the Giro d'Italia. So that's two riders losing strength, and then no one can replace Filippo Ganna. Now I'll go one more deeper here on Team INEOS because last year they had Gianni Moscon on the list. He's left and went over to Astana, and so he won't be here. And he climbed deep into the early week or two of the Giro d'Italia, which helps set up the team later. And remember, which helps the legs of Danny Martinez to be able to climb better in the final week of the Giro d'Italia because he didn't have to do as much in the early week 1, week 2 of Giro d'Italia. So Team INEOS are in a little bit of a predicament here because they don't have the same strength that they had last year. But I still have him as my number one favorite here because Richard Carapaz is on good form. He had some crashes early in the season, but it's been a little while since that, so he should be 100% recovered. He went well at Catalonia, finishing second on the general classification, just lighting up the race with 2 stages to go with Agita. So he finished second overall and won the stage there. Now, second favorite here at Giro d'Italia for the general classification, I'm going to put Simon Yates. We all hopefully remember the last stage of Paris-Nice when he dropped Primoz Roglic, Wout van Aert, and every climber during the race of Paris-Nice to go up the road and put on a fabulous display and win the final stage. It took Wout van Aert being on fantastic form to chauffeur Primoz Roglic for Roglic to be able to keep the Paris-Nice title and wrap up Paris-Nice with a win for Jumbo-Visma. Now, Simon Yates is a bit of a predicament, though, because he doesn't have a lot of depth for climbing when we're talking about into these big mountain stages. So again, that's where we're going to see INEOS a little depleted in strength on the finish of these mountain stages. And we're going to see Simon Yates possibly without any teammates starting the last climb of Giro d'Italia stages. Now, the first 3 stages up in Budapest, remember there's one time trial on stage 2, flat stages on stage 1, followed by what should be a sprint stage on stage 3, and then they're going to head back down to the south of Italy and do the first big mountain summit finish stage here on stage 4. Not a mountainous, not a big super steep climb because it's about 22 kilometers long, but only at 5.9%. Now that is enough to absolutely drop guys that aren't GC and aren't pure climbers. But when we're on stage 4, followed by a rest day, because they're going to do stage 1, 2, and 3 in Hungary, fly over, have a rest day, and then stage 4, everybody's going to be rested. So we're going to see a lot more team help on this first mountain stage of stage 4 of the Giro d'Italia than we should see later into the mountain stages of Giro. Now, when I'm looking at the sprinters, keep an eye out that Mark Cavendish is going to have to go against Caleb Ewan here from Lotto Soudal. Both riders I expect to eject out of the Giro d'Italia at some point in time. I would imagine somewhere between stages 8 and 10 is when we're going to see those sprinters try to eject themselves out of here because they got to have plans of going to the Tour de France. But remember, for Mark Cavendish, He needs to have fabulous form and win something here at the Giro d'Italia to have any hope of going to the Tour de France with his Quick Step team to battle with Fabio Jakobsen for that spot of the sprinter team there on the Tour de France squad. If Mark Cavendish wants to make that squad, he's got to win here. And I don't believe, to my knowledge, that he's been able to beat Caleb Ewan one-on-one in these big sprints. Mark Cavendish was fabulous in the beginning of the season, and of course at Milano-Torino he won there too. UAE Tour, when he won his stage there, he won in dominant style. He's beaten just about every sprinter there is at the European peloton here at 2022 except Caleb Ewan. So we'll get more into details on tomorrow's edition of Beyond the Coverage for the sprinters. Now let's get back to the GC men here for the 2022 Giro d'Italia, and I'll talk about my third place favorite here to finish out the podium in the Giro d'Italia. This was an incredibly hard pick, but I'm going to go with Joao Almeida, the UAE Team Emirates rider. He's been on good form. I believe he should have won Catalonia without the funky, bad team tactics that the knucklehead directors and the riders themselves, Marc Soler, the Solerism effect, when he sat up and quit on that second to last stage at Catalonia. If it wasn't for that, Joao Almeida would have won a World Tour stage race at Vuelta a Catalonia. Instead, he's going to start here at Giro d'Italia with a stage win at Catalonia and no general classification victory. But when I think about the top three here, I got to put him third because everyone behind him I haven't seen as fantastic or spectacular 2022 season. Honestly, Movistar looks solid in terms of Alejandro Valverde winning something, and Ivan Sosa just got done winning Asturias. But we haven't seen those two riders go good in a long time at the big Grand Tours, so I'm going to leave them off, but I wouldn't be surprised. Now, when we go further down the list outside the podium, of course, we're going to look at BORA Hansgrohe. They have 4 riders there with some depth. Wilco Kelderman could do something amazing. He's got top 5 results in Grand Tours. And of course, he went 5th at the Tour de France, went 3rd here at the Giro d'Italia a couple years ago. So Wilco Kelderman looks solid, but he has no results yet in 2022 season. Emmanuel Buchmann, same thing. Rider's gone top 5 in Grand Tours, but doesn't have any results really to speak of here in 22 season. Those are the 2 big GC guys for BORA Hansgrohe. Jai Hindley went 2nd here at the Giro d'Italia in 2020 during the COVID year and has yet to produce those kind of results. It's actually Leonard Kamna, the 4th rider for BORA Hansgrohe that's won something during the 22 season, and that was at Classic des Alpes where he won a stage there. So BORA Hansgrohe thick with numbers, but just don't have the results this year to back up putting them on a podium position here at the Giro d'Italia. Romain Bardet, who won Classic des Alpes, was aggressive throughout those 4 or 5 stages there at Classic des Alpes, could easily go on a podium here at Giro d'Italia if he's carrying that form from Classic des Alpes. And if he is carrying that form, I should have put him in the top 3, but I'm still going to put him behind my top 3 favorites just because I haven't seen him go good at a Grand Tour in quite a few years. Tom Dumoulin, Jumbo-Visma. How can I leave out Tom Dumoulin out of the top 3? Well, we haven't seen him ride good in a while. Certainly if Tom Dumoulin arrives here with his 2017 Giro d'Italia form, I think he's going to wax all of the favorites here and could win the Giro d'Italia, but we have not seen that form out of Tom Dumoulin in a long time. Now, Team Astana, Miguel Angel Lopez. He, of course, is riding good. He just got done winning a stage at Classic des Alpes for Astana, and he has teammate Vincenzo Nibali here. Vincenzo Nibali, it's been a long time since he's won a Grand Tour, but not that long ago. And let me remind you, he's got 2 Giro d'Italia wins, 1 Tour de France win, and 1 Tour of Spain win way back, I believe it was 2009. So it's been a long time. But Vincenzo Nibali has not really ridden top of his game and since the 2019 season when he won the final mountain stage of the Tour de France that year. But if he won, would we not ask ourselves, how could we not pick him to win the Giro d'Italia when he's won 4 Grand Tours? I still don't have him in my list of favorites to reach the podium here at the Giro d'Italia, but we certainly wouldn't be surprised if he won. Hugh Carthy, EF Education, another rider we have to look at for the general classification, but what has he done in 22 season? There isn't much on his resume to speak of here before starting the Giro d'Italia, but we know he can run good and run a podium in Grand Tours. We saw him at the Tour of Spain a couple years back. He was solid and ran a podium that year, so we got to have him on our list if if he can get his form back up to something that mirrors last year and the year before's fitness. Last on my list, Mikel Landa, Bahrain victorious. Now, he's always talked about as a favorite on the general classification here, and Bahrain victorious always seem to find a way to get a big result at any race they show up at. This year, though, it's a different story. They don't have Damiano Caruso, who finished second on the general classification at last year's 2021 edition, and they're missing other big hitters on their team. In their replacement, though, Mikel Landa, when we're talking about riding as well as Damiano Caruso, he was their team leader here last year. So we expect him to ride something phenomenal here. But again, when you go back to the 2022 season, all the races before here at the Giro d'Italia, I've seen him riding strong at the front, Classic des Alpes. He looked fabulous at Liège, Bastogne-Liège, but again, no results really to speak of in the 2022 season, except for always having his mug up at the front of the peloton, pulling hard and driving everything along. He has teammates behind to help him out in Pello Bilbao. And Pello Bilbao, he was riding for a Classic des Alpes, but Pello Bilbao fell apart on the last short, rainy day of Classic des Alpes and lost the general classification hopes. Now, one other teammate you got to talk about is Wout Poels. Wout Poels has been known for riding deep into the mountain stages here at the 3 Grand Tour races when we're talking about getting up these last mountains. But we haven't really seen him ride general classification. So Bahrain victorious, when you think about how well they've done at every race and you look at their general classification hopes here for Bahrain victorious, the only rider that stands out is Mikel Landa when I'm talking about the general classification hopes, unless Pello Bilbao can find the form to go deeper into the mountain stages. So far, though, it's not on his resume here at 2022 season. So that's my pick right there. Top 3s have to be Richard Carapaz, Simon Yates, and I'm going Joao Almeida for UAE Team Emirates. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. And for tomorrow's Beyond the Coverage edition, I'm going to cover the sprinters here for this first few stages of Giro d'Italia. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next edition of Beyond the Coverage.